I'm James Abbington, Associate Professor of Church Music and Worship at Candler School of Theology. Yaroslav Pelikan, who said, "Tradition is the living faith of the dead, and traditionalism is the dead faith of the living." And he goes on to say, and it is probably traditionalism that has given tradition such a bad name. I use that quite a bit when I am talking about music and worship practices because I think what has happened in so many of our churches is the addiction to traditionalism. Another way of saying it is we've always done it this way. This is what my mother did, my grandmother did. This is what I do. This is the form. This is the rubric. We sang these songs. We used this hymnal, and we did it this way. So it's the living faith of the dead that we're actually ignoring. The tradition. Why are these songs here? Certainly Isaac Watts, Charles Wesley, Fanny Crosby, Charles Albert Tindley, Lucy Campbell, Thomas Dorsey are all gone. But their music is still the living faith of these soldiers who have gone on. I think that the music of enslaved African Americans, or certainly the Black church, has always had lament, has expressed lament. In fact, the very nature of what the Black church was and what it was intended to be for its people meant that it had to be a place of lament. It had to be a place where you could go and you could share pain. Early church, we look at the spiritual as the earliest kind of indigenous form of music that was created by unknown bards who sang of pain, suffering, alienation, fear, so many other things as they experienced, and they brought them collectively in. And as they heard sermons, they created songs in response to them. Songs that we call spirituals.
Now get it, Lord, why me for me? Why should I dare? Since I was there, now get it, Lord, for me.
It's very interesting that it was Bishop Daniel Payne in his recollection of 70 years who felt that the AME church had reached a point where it needed to let those cornfield ditties go, that ridiculous clapping and being emotional, and there needed to be more fitting and proper worship. But the spirituals needed to go from their worship. And as a result of that, in many cases, people rebelled because it took away from them the opportunity to express themselves, because Payne wanted high liturgy. He wanted what he had been exposed to in his Lutheran and his Episcopal training and background for the early African Methodist Episcopal Church, to the point that the congregation, the people, the community who sang out of needs that they had as a group, corporate groups, improvisation, songs created bent on moods and emotion was the norm. And so to have this ability to do this and to address issues at the time was something that happened. One of the unfortunate issues in a discussion of music in the Black church has to do with style. What is considered the appropriate style? What is Black? What is authentically church, Black church? The tragedies among many African Americans was that tension, that somehow you had to be in the, much like Payne, the fit, proper, and good high worship, or it was heathenistic. It was not acceptable. It was an abomination. It was embarrassing. And of course, around the turn of the 20th century, there was the development of blues and jazz, and then early part of the 20th century, we get gospel, which comes out of that tradition. That became very problematic for a lot of black congregations. Those that were more educated, affluent, and who chose to model after the dominant styles of worship. It was said many times, don't bring that Saturday night music up in here, that coon music in the Lord's house. So, for example, musicians who may play on Saturday night and played again on Sunday morning were expected to play two different ways. So, for example, on Saturday night, my baby done gone now. I've gotta sleep here all alone. Well, that's Saturday night. That same musician wakes up. I know the Lord will make a way. Oh, church, I know the Lord will. Yes, He will. The Lord will make a way somehow. Well, folks said, now we can't have that coming up in the church on Sunday morning. Now, I've just always been fascinated and confused as to how would the deacons know what the music was like on Saturday night if they weren't at the club, because you would think they would be getting their black suits and their white socks and their shirts and ties ready for church on Sunday morning. But that was a real dilemma. I'm thinking of congregational hymns that I have heard performed in Cannon Chapel. I will look on the program and see Leaning on the Everlasting Arms. What a fellowship. I'm trying to imagine, wow, wonder what that's going to sound like. The organist is playing the introduction, and he or she is going to play. And I look at some of those students who are very comfortable with that, and others who are like, what was that? Because in their church, they would be used to this treatment of that. What a joy divine, leaning on the everlasting arm. What a blessedness, what a peace of mind, leaning on the everlasting. Oh, I'm leaning somebody say, yeah, that's the Baptist way of doing it. But we got some Kojics. What a fellowship, what a joy divine, meaning of the everlasting love. What a blessedness, what a peace of mind, meaning the everlasting love. If I lean on Jesus Christ, my Savior, safe and secure from all men. So that would be the Kojik's way of singing that same hymn. But it's the tradition that that person has come from. One final example that comes to my mind is from the composer David Fraser, who several years ago, and his story is fascinating, about the song I Need You to Survive. He chose to put the song on the project that ultimately came out around the time of 9/11. And whatever the hit song or whatever the hot song was going to be, after the events of 9/11 and all of the things that happened, suddenly I Need You to Survive became the anthem. And it was the song that people were singing. In fact, it appears in the Total Praise hymnal. But he was very intentional about singing it in unison and also using very simple chords so that people in the congregation would not be intimidated to sing it together, but that it actually became a song of fellowship. I need you. So you think about this idea of melody. And he wrote it in such a way that was accessible to the congregation. But the most important things were, I need you to survive. I won't let words from my mouth harm you. But it became immediately a congregational song, something that all of the people who listened to that could sing. And before you knew it, the song went all over the world and has been translated into a number of different languages. And there are times, even with COVID, and so many other things that we experience, I Need You to Survive comes back as that kind of song of the time or the crisis. There have been songs like that, and there are so many from so many traditions. But it is important to remember that it is not about casting a judgment or value of this is high, this is low, this is secular sounding, this is sacred sounding. But let's see, what is the text saying to people in the times? And trust me, a good tune will carry a great text.